coworker must have sensed this and offered that I join a group of his friends for a haunted asylum tour. I was invited to explore an abandoned asylum, yet we never should have entered that place. I've always liked October and the Halloween vibes it brought. As I got older, I stopped being able to have the same kind of childish wonder towards the season. Watching scary movies late at night or going to haunt houses didn't feel the same. I didn't know him very well, as we only worked together for 2 weeks. I debated whether I wanted to be with strangers for the night. It wasn't as if I had any other plans, so I accepted. He asked me to bring a camera, which he heard I owned. From the sounds of things, he wanted to record our outing and put it on his YouTube channel, and I didn't care either way, so the handheld camera had been a hand-me-down. It would be nice to finally use it outside of live events for co-workers. We met after work so he could drive us to this building. I've never heard of an asylum being within driving distance, I told him on the way. It was shut down after a lot of abuse was uncovered, and I mean a lot of nasty stuff. The city did everything it could to wipe the records of the place, and locals don't like talking about it because a lot of their older relatives worked there. Brian explained as he drove, so I nodded as I half listened. I hadn't even been able to find the name online. They must have done a great deal of scrubbing to erase this place so well. Since I wasn't paying much attention and focused more on my phone during the drive, I didn't know where we ended up. The road slowly became surrounded by trees, then turned into a dirty pathway I wasn't certain we should be driving along. This building was really out of the way. The trees finally parted, and I could see a massive building on top of a hill that Brian's car struggled against. Some other cars were already waiting for us. A full moon shone between clouds, and a slight breeze caused coloured leaves to drift across the unkempt lawn. The white paint peeled off the front of the stone walls, and most of the dark windows were broken. This place looked like it came straight out of a bad horror movie. At least I would be getting my Halloween fill this season. We parked with the other 2 cars, and Brian started to introduce everyone, yet there would be 7 people in total. Kayla, a girl he's known since high school, waved when we walked over. Brian worked with Brian at their last job. He didn't appear overly excited about the entire idea. I got the sense he was somehow bribed to be here. Liam and his sister arrived next in the same car. They were both tall, and within seconds of meeting them, I got the impression they could be friends with anyone. The last person arrived a few minutes after them, saying how they almost got lost, but okay, good, we're all here. Then everyone wearing proper footwear. There are a lot of rusty nails and broken glass inside. How about flashlights? Brian started looking over the group. Most of us had our cell phones for flashlights. He didn't want us using up our batteries, so he handed out small pen lights as well as some walkie-talkies, so I was impressed by all of this. Even though I was only working with him for a short time, I didn't have a very high opinion of his work ethic. When he was motivated, it seemed like he thought things through. Are you going to split up and explore in groups? Kayla asked, sounding nervous. Yeah, no, not if you don't want to, but it's up to you guys, but I brought the radios just in case. This place is a maze, so it's easy to get lost. Our new friend Benny here will be recording for us, but it would be nice if you guys could as well if you do decide to go off alone. I winced at the nickname. I've asked him 100 times not to call me that, then just Ben was fine. Furthermore, I used my flashlight to look over the side of the building and noticed something I hadn't before. From the tops of the windows, a blackness had curled up and stained the sides, and a familiar smell came to the air. And was there a fire here? I asked. For some odd reason, Brian's face grew a little pale. I heard there was one, but it was put out before too much damage was done. I think sometimes homeless people camp here. I don't know why he sounded a little stressed over my question, yet I ignored it, and Kayla spoke up. Are we going to come across anyone inside? She said, a little frightened over the idea, and a new shelter opened up. Remember, why would they camp in this place when they have access to warm meals and a free bed? Brian shrugged. Well, just in case no one should go off alone, let's get everyone's numbers. You know, if we drop the radio or something. Liam suggested. For the next few minutes, we did just that. I realized that most of these people knew Brian, but this was the first time they were meeting each other. I wasn't the odd person out in this group. Everyone ready? Brian asked and got a positive response. A cold wind blew, almost ushering our group inside. An odd feeling came into my stomach as I suddenly wanted to turn back and go home. I shook my head, refusing to back out now. Then besides, Brian was my ride. Lifting the handheld camera, I followed behind the group, unaware of what waited for us inside. The lobby was massive with cracked tiles. It opened to a large set of wooden stairs that branched out, leading to opposite sides of the building, so our footsteps echoed through the room. Liam and his sister walked ahead of the group to the front desk. He leaned over, looking through the papers that were left behind. Then they must have closed down suddenly. I think these files have some personal information that shouldn't be left out for anyone to see, he commented, placing the dirty papers back down. It is weird, I've never heard of this place. One of the group commented. Yeah, you would think it would be a huge local legend or something. Another person chimed in. Which side do you want to start with? Brian asked, ignoring the previous questions. Right, a left. Two sets of voices came at the same time. After a quick game of rock, paper, scissors, it was decided we would go left. From the looks of things, the rooms for the staff were on the right and the patients were on the left. Any treatment rooms were in the basement and the common areas were on the first floor. It would be impossible for us to look at the entire building in one night. Let's look on the left side and then go to the basement for the good stuff, Brian said, and we all agreed. We made our way upstairs, the group chattering away, ruining the atmosphere. Then it wasn't overly upset over that. Sure, I did want a spooky night out, but after nearly an hour of recording banter and silly antics of the group, I found myself preferring this kind of night over what I expected. Each room we peeked into was more or less the same. We're in beds with some personal items left behind. It looked like everyone just got up and left. Each item is slowly being overtaken by the elements. Weird how there isn't any graffiti, I commented as we walked down a hallway. Another burst of wind blew through the broken windows, creating a ghastly sound that made some of the group shudder. Oh, you're right. Cale agreed, looking at the bare and painted walls. A strong smell of something burnt came with the wind, and I found myself covering my nose with my hand, so Liam noticed and sniffed the air. So what's up? Are you feeling sick? He asked, and I shook my head, looking around, trying to find the source of the smell. So no, it's like something is on fire. Am I the only one who? I stopped as I looked over the group. It was dark, but with our flashlights I could see everyone, but I counted 6 people, and 6. I started looking inside rooms, trying to find the last person. We had been introduced, and yet I couldn't remember their name to call out for them. Are you sure you're not feeling sick? Liam asked, watching me as I darted between rooms. A cold fear came to my chest as I pushed by him and opened a door, and inside was a large operating room. Tools scattered along the floor, an old, massive light hanging overhead, a stained steel table. I left the door open and went to the room next to it. A doctor's office was inside, with an overturned bookcase and files littering the floor. I thought we were in the patient's living area. Why is there an operating room here? I asked, unable to hide the stress in my voice. I saw the small group glance over, faces pale at the realization. Maybe. Kayla started but couldn't think of an answer. Was it the 7 of us? I finally said, so they all appeared confused. Liam slowly nodded and glanced down at his phone. That was right. We all got each other's numbers, and the last person's name should be there. I took out mine, looking at the small contact list, and 6 new numbers, yet I raised my head, meeting Liam's eyes, yet he was as scared as I felt. I think it's time to leave, I told them sternly. He took hold of his sister's hand, ready to drag her out if needed. So why? So because you can't count. It was always the 6 of us, right? Brian said, so I narrowed my eyes at him. For some odd reason, it sounded like he was trying to convince us. Was this a prank they were playing on the new guy? And no. I remember adding 7 contacts to my phone, then it hadn't left my pocket, so someone couldn't delete it. And everyone here wasn't friends with each other, then only Brian. Movement at the end of the hallway caught my eye. Lifting the flashlight, the beam fell on a dirty gown. The figure hunched over, skin black and cracked. Lifting its head, it looked at us with bright orange eyes as the smell of smoke and burnt meat filled the hallway. Prank or not, I wasn't going to risk it. On! I shouted, and it caused everyone to move at once. I heard screaming as we stumbled over each other. In the chaos, I dropped the handheld camera, but I didn't care, so Brian did. He scooped it up and then darted inside one of the side rooms. My vision was blurred as I ran as fast as I could, trying to get out of this damn place. No matter how many times we turned a corner in the hallway, we couldn't seem to find the stairs. If something was following us, I didn't see it, but I smelled something burnt close by. So this isn't getting us anywhere, Liam said and pulled his sister into a side room. We followed him, out of breath and faces stained with sweat. The room was small and could barely hold all of us. It looked like a solitary confinement cell with scratches on the cement wall. When we calm down, we'll find a window and get out that way, Liam explained after gasping for some air. Something replaced him might keep counting days, marking steps. If the real Tom, my husband, is alive, where is he? My wife is convinced that I've been replaced. Please help me. I don't know what to do. Then yes, it probably sounds insane. I should start with the backstory, but God, how hard it is to remember the simple happy times before everything that happened. I met my wife Catherine when she was 24 and I was 28. We lived in a small town in Kentucky. You'd have trouble finding it even with a map, and the population is tiny. Everyone knew each other. I'd worked as an electrician all my life, first at a factory, then I started my own small business, repairs, wiring, private jobs. My love life had never really worked out until I met her. She worked as an elementary school teacher, smiled at every child, was kind and polite to everyone. My Catherine was the only ray of light in the surrounding darkness. Then I loved her for her simplicity. She could find joy in the most ordinary things: morning coffee, the smell of wet grass, a cheap movie on the couch. We didn't have much money, but we had peace, a home, a dog, and that feeling that everything was right, that everything would be fine. I spent evenings fixing things while she wrote lesson plans or knitted. Sometimes we'd sit in silence, listening to crickets, or stay up all night talking about everything and nothing, thinking about children and what we'd name them. Back then, it felt like life had finally found its meaning, yet the problems began maybe 2 months ago, but at first small things. She started having trouble sleeping, then began looking at me strangely, as if something in my face disturbed her. I asked if everything was okay, and she laughed, "Sorry, just tired. The kids at school are driving me crazy." Gradually though, I can't even say exactly when it got worse, yet she slept less. Not because she had insomnia, but because she was afraid to fall asleep. I asked her what was wrong, but she said she was fine. Still, when we lay together, she'd suddenly get up and go into another room, returning only at dawn. She started having nightmares, but never told me what they were. One day I lost my temper. You have to understand, I was just worried about my wife. From the lack of sleep, she started to look worse: dark circles under her eyes, red eyes, pale skin. She lost weight, and every time I tried to help, she pushed me away. So I sat her down across from me and directly asked what she was dreaming about. She was silent for a long time, trembling and glancing at me furtively, as if she was afraid. And then, when tears began to roll down her cheeks, she whispered, "There's a man in my dreams, a god. I'm scared, Tom." I went to hug her, and when I reached for her, she flinched, as if I'd frightened her. After that, things seemed to get better, or so I thought, so how wrong I was. She used to ask how my day went, but now she just stared out the window. With each passing day, she spoke to me less and less, her words short and dry, and then she'd go to the bathroom or kitchen for some errands, closing the door behind her. And it wasn't just the silence, her eyes had changed. If before they were green, emerald-like, full of life and love, now her gaze made my spine go cold. There wasn't anger or hatred there. No, it was something closer to mistrust. Wariness, as if she was seeing me for the first time. Over the next week I began to feel anxious, a strange burning under my skin. As if something was wrong, but I couldn't tell where the crack was until I realized. Yes, she was studying me. When I drank coffee, I could feel her eyes on me. I'd look up, and she'd immediately turn away, pretending to slice fruit, but her fingers trembled, and then I froze halfway to the board. I'd step outside for a smoke, and when I turned around, I'd see her peeking through the curtain, then she'd instantly close it. When I showered, I'd catch her watching me, studying my body, then she'd run away. She started doing it even while I slept. She almost stopped talking to me, instead writing something in a notebook and hiding it as soon as I entered the room. Photos began to disappear from their frames. She'd talk on the phone with someone, but hang up the moment I came in. I made an appointment with a psychologist for us, but she refused, said she was afraid to be near me. It all happened so suddenly. It seemed just yesterday we were stargazing in each other's arms, and now this, but the strangeness grew every day. Sometimes she asked me to sleep on the couch. I agreed, hoping it would calm her, but it was useless. Her paranoia only worsened. It got to the point where, when I tried to hug her, she screamed, "Don't come near me," and flinched as if I'd hit her. After one of those nights, I decided I had to find out what was really going on, even if it meant taking her to a doctor afterward. I pretended to be asleep when she stood in the hallway, then she slowly approached, soft, careful steps. She stopped at the foot of the bed, and for several seconds there was a dead silence, broken only by her uneven breathing, so I could feel her watching, then not just watching, comparing. That's when I became truly terrified, a cold dread twisting inside me as my wife became something I couldn't recognize. Then the bed shifted slightly as she sat down on the edge, then the air grew heavy. I could feel her stare physically, like pressure on my skin. Then her cold fingers gently touched my wrist, held it for a few seconds, then quickly let go, as if burned, and whispered, "Pulse faster than Tom's." My heart clenched so hard I nearly twitched. She leaned closer, so I could hear her breathing against my face, short, shaky. She smelled of lavender and something sour that made goosebumps crawl down my back, so her lips barely moved. I remember clearly Tom had a small scar right here. She touched my cheek. "But you don't." I clenched my teeth to keep from gasping. Those few seconds of silence lasted an eternity, and what scar? I never had a scar on my cheek, I'd know if I did. I wanted to sink into the ground and scream all at once, but I kept lying still until I heard a choked sob and her fading footsteps, but the door slammed. Furthermore, I opened my eyes, my heart pounding furiously. Furthermore, I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, too afraid to close my eyes. In the morning, I went to work early, dreading the hours until my shift ended. That evening, over dinner, I said, "Kate, we need to talk. What's going on?" She gripped her fork, so tightly her knuckles turned white, then looked me dead in the eye. "Tom, you've been acting strange. What do you mean? I don't know. And sometimes you look different, but sometimes your voice sounds wrong. You even smell different." I didn't know what to say. My head was chaos, and somehow I just laughed. "Kate, maybe you're just imagining things. I don't know, Tom." My eyes fell on the knife rack. There was a clean strip of dust where the largest kitchen knife should have been the one we used for everything: bread, meat, anything. I distinctly remembered it being there before that night. My heart slammed into my throat with a primal panic. I looked at Kate, and she was staring right at me. I wanted to speak, but couldn't. It hit me then my wife might be planning to kill me. The next morning she left for work, and I, like a caged animal, started searching the house, but I hadn't slept in nearly 48 hours. I know I should have just left or taken her to a hospital, but she's my wife, yet I love her. She has to see that I am me. I tore through the apartment, frantic, desperate to find something, anything that would help me understand what was happening to her then, and I did. After about an hour, in the back of the closet behind a pile of sweaters, I found her wooden box, an old, slightly cracked. The lid was ajar, and when I opened it, a thick notebook fell into my hands, so it smelled of coffee and sweat. Her initials on the cover, written in her neat cursive. My heart froze as I realized it was the diary she'd been hiding from me, but the paper bent under my fingers. Her handwriting familiar, but this time jagged, shaky, the page stained with what looked like tears. "So he's sleeping. So I stand by the bed and watch. Then he looks like Tom, but he's not. Tom had a scar on his left hand, from the accident by the river, yet this one's skin is smooth. He smiles, but the smile doesn't reach his eyes." A wave of nausea rose in my throat. With each page, her handwriting grew more erratic. I tested his speech. "He says I love you in the same tone, but without warmth, not like before." Tom smelled of vanilla, but this one smells of dust and cheap cologne, and I couldn't believe what I was reading. My knees trembled. Surrounding it tightened like a noose. Yet I flipped to the last page. I can't let this thing stay in our house, and it wears his smile, his name. I tried talking to it, begging, but it just smiled and said all the right words, so it didn't defend itself. Then maybe because it isn't afraid, but its right hand twitches when it lies. I could have killed IT today, but for some reason I couldn't. I know I have to. Then for Tom, furthermore, I won't let some monster wear his skin, so my hands were slick with sweat. My whole body was sweating, even though the room was cold. I placed the diary on the bed and sat down, trying to process everything I just read. Yet an accident, but God, she was exaggerating. All that came out of it was a concussion and some bruised ribs. I stayed in the hospital for about a week, but yeah, and 7 days, so then my phone rang, making me jump. It was Sheriff Martin, a kind old man I'd known for years. "What to Tom, everything all right over there?" Then Catherine called, said someone's living in your house pretending to be her husband. I froze. "What did you say?" "He says you're not you. I've known her for a year, always seemed stable, and domestic quarrel, huh?" "No, yet just a stress." Then she's tired. Evening came slowly. I sat on the couch, elbows on my knees, looking at an old photograph, the one that used to sit on our mantel before all this. Catherine and I by the lake, smiling, her arms around me, the sun so bright that day we had to squint. I stared at us, at the little details, her blonde hair catching the light, her hand around mine, the green shimmer in our eyes, but it felt like a lifetime ago. When the door creaked open, I nearly jumped. My wife, if I can still call her that, steps were slow and tired, her back thudding softly to the floor. She looked exhausted, her eyes red, her hair a mess, so I stood, holding the diary. "Kate, we need to talk." She looked at me warily, like a trapped animal sensing a snare. "What's that in your hand?" Her voice was even, but something trembled in it. "Yet I found this. I need to understand what's happening," I said, showing her the diary. Then Catherine froze. For a moment, I thought she'd break down crying, but instead, she slowly stepped closer, looking straight into my face, her cold breath brushing against my skin. "And so what did you figure out, Tom?" I stared at those scissors in the tub, specks of blood around them, and I was hit with the overwhelming sense that they wanted more. I bought a pair of antique scissors, and they cut too well. In full accuracy, the title should say shears, as Elizabeth would insist on correcting me. Apparently, once a pair of scissors reaches the ripe length of 8 inches, it becomes shears. These measure in at 8 1/4, and Elizabeth is a collector of vintage scissors. I suppose there is a bit of a world for that, but it's not nearly as structured as some worlds of collection, meaning that there aren't inherently much better types of scissors than others in terms of collectability. And the ability to figure out exactly who the maker or the age of a pair of scissors is mostly a game of vague clues and indefinite endings. I found them in an antique stall at the State Fair of all places. I had no idea that they had stalls like that, but amongst vendors selling art and beef jerky and wind chimes I found a humble antique seller. The proprietor was a kindly-looking old lady, I say looking because she was honestly kinda rude. I'm an avid explorer when it comes to things like fairs and museums, so I walked in to see what she had to offer. A pile of trinkets here and a mound of baubles there. I hate to say, but it just felt like a lot of junk. None of this stuff was particularly polished or displayed with any sense of importance. I was happy to abandon my search when a smaller group of items mounted on paintballs caught my attention. Furthermore, I'd assumed these were the better quality items, as they at least seemed to transcend the status of clutter, so that's when the scissors caught my eye, but I pulled them off the pegboard. A gold foil picture caught my attention too, so I grabbed that and made my purchase with the woman. The scissors, or shears upon measuring them, are old and iron. They are dark brown hue marked with patches of patina, making some spots closer to orange and others tar black. The shape of the handles is plain, but the blades are fascinating. One is similar to a modern-day scissor blade, but the other is thicker and nearly twice as wide. Based on some quick research, they would appear to be bookbinder scissors designed for cutting through thick paper and leather. The next day, I had placed them in a cardboard box with styrofoam peanuts and was measuring out the gift wrap when something ironic happened, and I couldn't find any scissors. I needed to cut the paper, then the ribbon, but I couldn't find a single pair. Not the one that's normally in my desk, nor the kitchen scissors or even the fabric scissors usually in the craft closest. As I closed the door to the craft closet, I laughed to myself. What a ridiculous issue when I had a solution right here. So I fished them out of the packing peanuts, slid my fingers into the handles, then took them to the paper. This was when I realized that I hadn't actually opened or cut anything with them yet. While Elizabeth doesn't feel that strongly, her preference is that they work passably. So this would double as a test run, and surprisingly, considering their wear, they worked perfectly. They glided seamlessly through the paper then the ribbon. As I sat looking at the cut paper, I decided that I needed to redo it. So I crumpled it up and began again, this time carefully and methodically sliding the scissors through the paper. And I was amazed that even going slowly the blades didn't catch for a moment. I imagined how perfect the edge must be, yet how immaculately sharp. I looked down to see red starting to spread into the paper. It radiated from a small kick in my thumb. In my fixation on the scissors, I had stupidly left my thumb at the edge of the paper in its path. It was fine, I just finished the cut and removed any bit that had been stained, yet there was still more than enough. I placed the box in the center of the paper and I found myself hesitating. It was time to put the scissors back in the box, but I just didn't want to, so not anymore. I started to think to myself that she has so many that she couldn't possibly be able to actually appreciate any of them individually anymore. Not like I would as someone who didn't have a collection. And now it seemed I didn't even have my normal ones, so I could only cherish them all the more. Quicker than I would like to admit, I came to a decision and I wrapped the box and tied the ribbon with the gold foil picture inside. Happy with the outcome, I took the scissors and I thought it was no better time to get to the collaging that I had been meaning to get to for weeks. A box under my desk overflowed with magazines, taunting me every time I walked past it. It was about time that I faced it. In particular, I was so excited because on a previous antiquing trip I had found a glamour magazine from the 1950s with a picture of Marilyn Monroe that I was eager to make the centerpiece of my new collage. Soon I was engulfed in a pile of scrap paper. But for a moment I felt a sort of panic, like I was standing in a snowstorm watching it build up around me, and before long I would be buried alive in it, snow piling past my mouth, and I'd be choking on the cold before I knew what was happening. So I shook it off and continued on my way, savouring and enjoying every snip and cut of paper. The scissors continued to perform perfectly in my hands. And finally I was facing a beautiful background for Marilyn. I had already cut her out in preparation, so the only thing left was to glue her on. I turned to pick her up, but I don't know how or when yet, but it was ruined. She was in two pieces, split at the neck. I tried to be so careful, but at some point I must have not noticed her sticking to a piece I was intending to cut and accidentally took her with it. I lamented her and felt my stomach drop. Furthermore, I sat with it for a minute before I picked up the tape and made do as best as I could. In the end it looked basically fine, but it felt like a waste of its potential, yet then a different disappointment struck me. I realized I didn't have anything else that I needed to cut. I had efficiently moved through my collaging box and didn't have anything else I needed to cut. So, with some melancholy, I put the scissors away in my desk drawer. The next day at work I had this persistent sense of longing. It didn't take much time to realize that I wanted some excuse to cut papers again. I have a desk job and one of my tasks is making copies of receipts. I had a small pile of them that I had done this morning, which meant I no longer needed the originals. So excitedly, I pulled out my desk pair of scissors and then took to cutting them in half, then half again, then taking off corners to try to round them out. But my excitement quickly faded, and I felt ridiculous. I set aside the scissors and threw away the scraps of the receipts and went back to my work feeling honestly childish. So I have a co-worker, yet her name is Emily. Emily is sort of a hippie type, but vegan, very organic, nature-focused. She's a kind person overall, and after a talk with HR last year when it was requested that she switch off from natural deodorant, she's always been a super easy person to get along with. The other thing to know about Emily is her hair is long, but very, very long. Usually at work she lets it hang all the way down to her butt, so however, today was different. Today she had spent the time to braid all of its incredible length. My eyes were transfixed by it, following it around whenever she would pass my desk or go down the hall I could see from my chair. I would catch myself staring and go back to my work, but I'd suddenly become aware that I hadn't actually done any work at my computer and that minutes had gone by without me even realizing. At one point I came to at my computer and realized I was staring at the lock screensaver. That meant I hadn't touched a key or even moved the mouse for at least 15 minutes, and if you had asked me I would have said no time had passed at all. I decided to get up and walk to the water cooler to clear my head. Lo and behold, who got to the water cooler just a moment before me, and she turned and apologized. As she turned back to fill her bottle, that braid whipped in front of my eyes. I don't remember catching it in my hand, and I absolutely don't remember even putting that pair of scissors in my work bag. But now somehow the braid was in one hand and the scissors were in the other. I will admit that I was fully aware as I opened them, then moved them to gently caress her on either side of the braid. Then with thoroughly smooth action I squeezed those two blades together. 3 feet of hair fell to the ground, and it even bounced, just a touch, but it felt luxurious. For a moment I was lost in euphoria. Then suddenly everything looked right, and she looked right. No strange long ugly hair, now everything was correct. But as I came back to myself and saw her eyes full of horror and anger and the tears welling in them, I was only too present. I was fired, packed up my desk, and was home within the hour. Strangely, I remembered packing that box close to the top of 4 years of accumulated bits and things, but when I set it down on my kitchen table I realized how incredibly light it was. When I opened it up there was only one item inside, so I'm not a fool. I can see that there's something wrong with these scissors, that they are in some way pushing me to use them, and they seem to have a nature to them that is scaring me. The problem is I want to throw them away, but now I'm home without a job or anything to focus my energy on. Fortunately, I have enough money that I'm not in dire straits if it takes a few weeks to get back to work. So I found myself with an excess of time. Time unfortunately has only provided fuel for this fire. As one day has folded into another I found my fingers entangled in the handle of the scissors more and more often. On day one I ran out of legitimate reasons to be using them. Everything that needed to be cut has been. And since I've sort of just been sifting through papers that are lying around that I don't need. Mostly what calls to me is that they often have such obnoxious corners, then jutting and inorganic. And I find that cutting through them makes the pictures themselves feel so much more correct, yet I suppose that's the word. Most of the time this correcting leads to a lovely result. There have been a handful of times when I found myself providing correction after correction, and before I realized it the picture or paper was rendered to nothing but confetti on the floor. My phone was in my hand, light jerking wildly, turning the forest into a strobe nightmare of trees and shadows and nothing that made sense, yet behind us I could hear it, so that rattling. We found something in the woods that grants wishes. I'm the only one who survived, and tomorrow I'm going back. The thing about Ryan was that he never committed to anything scary, but horror movies were out, and roller coasters were out. Even choosing college stressed him out because it meant closing doors, making something real and final, so his therapist called it decision paralysis. Then I called it self-preservation. When your dad walks out and your mom stops getting out of bed, you learn that some questions are better left unasked. Then I understood that. Ryan's mom had the kind of depression that kept the curtains drawn for weeks at a time. His dad left when Ryan was 11, and the last thing the guy said before walking out was that Ryan needed to man up and help your mother. Then so Ryan learned to be quiet, to fade into the background of rooms, and to make himself small enough that his presence wouldn't be another burden for anyone to carry, yet Casey was the opposite. She took up space like she'd been taught her whole life she deserved to. Student council, debate team, Instagram aesthetics so carefully curated it looked effortless. Her parents were the kind of people who showed up to every event with professional cameras, who had her entire academic future mapped out on a little poster board in their home office. Yale, then law school, then partnership in her father's firm. The thing was, Casey actually wanted none of that. She told me once, sophomore year, that she wished she could just work in a plant nursery, spend her days with her hands in dirt helping things grow. But she'd said it like it was a joke, like the idea of disappointing her parents was so unthinkable it could only exist as fantasy. So and Luke. Luke was more complicated than I wanted him to be, and he was tall, yet played varsity football. Had the kind of easy confidence that came from never being told he couldn't do something. But here's the thing nobody else seemed to notice. Luke's dad hit him. Not often enough to leave marks that lasted, but enough. I'd seen Luke flinch once when Ryan clapped him on the shoulder too suddenly. Seen the way he sometimes stood, favouring his left side like his ribs were sore. He never talked about it, and I never asked, but it was there between us like smoke, yet that's why he cheated on Casey, probably, and self-sabotage as a kind of protection. If you ruin it first, nobody can take it from you. I understood the logic even if I hated what it did to her. Even if watching her take him back felt like watching someone walk into traffic, then me. I was just trying to get through high school without my own damage becoming everyone else's problem. Then the folklore started on a Reddit thread. Someone's uncle's co-worker knew a guy who'd gone into the woods behind County Memorial and come back wrong, yet different. Kept talking about prices and payments and how everything cost something. 3 weeks later, he drove his truck into the lake with his whole family inside. It's bullshit, Ryan had said when Casey first brought it up, but his fingers were already drumming that nervous pattern on his knee. The one that meant he was thinking about it too hard, letting it get under his skin. So probably, Casey said. She was scrolling through satellite images of the hospital on her phone, zooming in on the forest that pressed against its southern edge. But wouldn't it be cool to check out just the hospital, then urban exploration, but the hospital had been abandoned since 2003. County Memorial, built in the 40s, shut down after some Medicare fraud thing bankrupted the board. 6 stories of brick and broken windows, wrapped in chain link and covered in the kind of graffiti that suggested people came here specifically to be forgotten. The forest beyond it was old growth pine, dense enough that hikers got lost every few years, yet search parties, helicopters, the whole production, so sometimes they found the bodies. We were standing by Casey's locker between 3rd and 4th period when she pitched the idea. Ryan looked like he wanted to crawl into the ventilation system. I was trying to figure out how to say no without sounding as scared as I felt when Luke appeared. He had this way of moving through crowds like they were designed to part for him, and people just stepped aside. He came up behind Casey and wrapped his arms around her waist, lifting her off her feet. She shrieked, kicking her legs, laughing in that way that made my stomach hurt. And what are we talking about? So Luke asked, setting her down, then Casey turned in his arms, already grinning. The hospital, yet the one with the woods out back, but we're thinking of exploring it. Sounds boring, Luke said, but he was looking at me when he said it, one eyebrow raised, but unless you're afraid. So there it was, yet a hook, yet Luke knew exactly what he was doing. He'd been doing it since middle school, this casual kneading that made saying no feel like admitting weakness. It was manipulative and obvious, and it worked anyway because I was 17 and stupid, and tonight I said, then 7 o'clock. Then Luke smiled, and Ryan looked like he might throw up. I told my parents I was sleeping at Ryan's. They barely looked up from their respective screens. My dad worked in insurance, my mom taught elementary school, and both of them seemed relieved I had friends to occupy my time. Teenagers were a mystery they decided not to solve. I climbed out my bedroom window at 6:30, dropping into the backyard with an impact that made my ankles ache. My bike was old, inherited from a cousin, and the chain made a clicking sound that seemed too loud in the quiet suburban evening. I texted Ryan that I was heading out. He sent back a thumbs up and nothing else. The hospital was 4 miles away, past the nice part of town and into the part where houses had bars on the windows. The sun was setting, turning the sky the colour of a bruise. By the time I reached the parking lot, full dark had fallen. The place looked worse than the photos suggested. The fog was real, thick enough that it pulled in low spots like something liquid. The hospital loomed beyond it, all those shattered windows like eye sockets in a skull. Someone had painted Memento Mori across the main entrance in dripping red letters, then my breath came out in clouds. October in New England, the kind of cold that got into your bones and stayed there, but I tried Ryan's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Casey's rang 4 times and went to her cheerful recording, then I took a photo. Posted it to Instagram with the caption "Bad decisions loading" and watched it get 3 likes before I'd even pocketed my phone, then had that swept across the lot. Luke's Camaro, black and impractical, his dad's cast off, yet the engine ticked as it cooled. Luke climbed out first, Casey from the passenger side. She was wearing his Letterman jacket over her hoodie, drowning in it, and Jesus, Luke said, breath fogging, but it's freezing, yet remind me why we're doing this adventure, Casey said, but she'd lost some of that enthusiasm from earlier. She looked small in the empty parking lot, younger than usual. Then Ryan's not here yet, I said, but Luke snorted, so probably chickened out, and then we heard the bike. Ryan came pedaling into the lot like he was being chased, skidding to a stop next to mine. His helmet was crooked, his face flushed red from cold and exertion. So where the hell were you? Then I asked, yet I called. Then got lost, Ryan panted, and no signal out here. Everything looks the same in the dark. And Casey was staring at the hospital now, really looking at it. Yet maybe this is stupid, she said quietly, so maybe we should just go home. We drove all the way out here, Luke said. He was already walking toward the building, hands shoved in his jacket pockets. Yet come on. We followed the fence line around to the back, and up close. The hospital felt worse, then bigger, yet more present. Like it was aware of us in some fundamental way. The windows on the first floor were boarded over, but high up they gaped open, and I kept expecting to see movement in them, so a face, and a hand. Brian was breathing too fast, that panicky rhythm that meant he was spiraling. I'd seen it before, usually during tests or when his mum called during school. The forest pressed against the fence, trees so dense they looked solid. Pine and oak and something that made the air smell like decay. We found a spot where someone had cut the chain link and peeled it back like the lid on a can. Yet, so we're really doing this? But Casey asked, yet nobody answered. Luke went first, ducking through, and then Casey. Then me and Ryan, who looked like he was walking to his execution. Then the forest was colder. That shouldn't have been possible, but it was. Our phone lights made narrow tunnels in the dark, catching on bark and exposed roots and something that might have been animal bones, so we walked single file, nobody speaking. Then there was no path. Just trees and darkness and the sound of our breathing. Then 5 minutes in, Luke stopped. Then this is stupid, he said, but there's nothing here. Let's go back, check out the hospital instead. Yeah, Casey said quickly, and the hospital, then better idea. Then we turned around. That's when something moved in the trees behind us, so heavy, then deliberate, and the sound of something large displacing air, so Casey backed into Luke, grabbing his arm. Ryan had gone statue still, and when I looked at him, his face had lost all colour. Animal, Luke said, but his voice was wrong, yet too high, and the thing moved again, then closer. And with it came a sound like wind chimes made of bone, a clicking rattle that made my teeth ache, and it stepped into the light. I want to tell you I processed what I was seeing. That my brain took in the details and categorized them in any useful way, but that's not what happened. What happened was my mind just stopped, like a computer program hitting a fatal error, then 7 feet tall, maybe more. A shape that suggested a body but refused to confirm one. Draped in moss and forest rot, organic material that might have been fabric or flesh or something in between, and the head, but God. A deer skull, bleached white, antlers spreading like broken fingers. Around its neck, strung on what looked like sinew, hung dozens of teeth, yet human teeth, maybe, and or animal. The distinction seemed less important than the fact of their existence. It had no eyes, but I felt it looking at us, yet looking into us. Luke made a sound I'd never heard him make before, something between a sob and a laugh, so the thing's jaw opened. Not like a jaw should, but hinging round too wide, and when it spoke, the voice came from everywhere and nowhere. From inside my skull and from the ground and from the air itself. Then you come to wish. The words scraped like rusted metal dragging across bone. Then all of you must wish. Then Casey was crying. I could hear its small hitching sobs behind me, but I couldn't turn to look at her. Couldn't stop staring at the creature, at the way it seemed to shift and settle like it wasn't quite solid, wasn't quite real, yet the sculpt twitched toward Ryan, yet Ryan opened his mouth. My mum screamed in pain and began to chase me. Then do not open that door, she shrieked. Lonely, so my mother was a lonely woman, but she wasn't perpetually sad. She didn't drag around the house in the same pajamas for days on end. I didn't see any tears day to day. But sometimes at night I could hear her crying in her room. I could hear her whispering pleas to God, asking for a man. When she was sad, she worked in our garden a lot. We had fresh flowers, vegetables, even pumpkins sometimes. I would help her too, and I had asked her why she liked to garden. She said it was therapeutic, like she could get in the dirt and bury all her problems and bad feelings away, then they become something beautiful. It's good for the soul, she would say with a sad smile. My dad wasn't in the picture from even before I was born, and I think Mom was worried about me not having a strong male figure in my life, that it would stunt my emotional growth or cause me to have issues later on in relationships. My mom was pretty too, especially when I was younger. I would see the other moms give her a narrow stare when she came to get me from school, and how the dads would offer to come over to fix anything at the house we needed. My mom would always smile politely and say no thank you, but that didn't stop the moms from their jealousy, yet I knew she would go on dates, but she would tell me when she would. She was always happy for a while after the date, and then one day she would be sad again. When I would ask about it, she would just say the same thing. Sometimes things don't work out, but we all deserve love. I promise I won't ever give up on love. I would wish that she could meet a nice guy who maybe worked at the toy store or an ice cream shop. Then they could get married and I would make out like a bandit. But as the years went on, no new guy seemed to stick around. When I was about 8, the crying at night stopped again. She had been on a date the night before, and I had a sitter from the neighborhood watching me. When I woke up the next morning, Mom was smiling and humming in the kitchen. "So are you making pancakes?" I asked excitedly. When she turned to me, she looked like she was going from the inside out. "Yes, I am. Do you want chocolate chips?" she asked me, pouring a spoonful of butter onto the hot skillet. "Yes," I cheered, pulling out my chair at our kitchen table. When we were eating, I asked her if her date was fun. She took a small sip of her coffee and smiled into the mug. "It was so fun. We talked all about you. He was also a gentleman and made sure I made it home safe. That's very important," she responded, stars dancing in her eyes. "But is he nice? But can I meet him? Yet does he own a toy store? Yet does he have a dog? I want a dog. And does he Whoa. My mum interrupted me laughing. "Maybe all that sugar was a bad idea. He's very nice, and I'm sure you can meet him soon." "How soon?" I asked, eyes wide, and she seemed to choose her words carefully. "I suppose whenever the time is right," she answered, passing the maple syrup to me. Then I was ecstatic. My mom looked so happy, and I thought that maybe if I met him, he would want to marry my mom and live with us. The crying at night stopped immediately, but was replaced with low voices talking, but a man and a woman. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but it sounded like the woman was upset. The next morning, I asked her who she was talking to the night before in her room. She asked, pouring her coffee from the pot. "I heard a man in your room. It sounded like you were mad," I clarified. Then she snorted and shook her head. "Then no, honey, that's my audiobook. My doctor said listening to them before going to sleep would help me relax. I even listen to them when I take baths sometimes. They're very soothing." "Remember when we went to check them out at the library together?" she asked me. I did remember she got a few different sets, and they were in hard cases. Yet, oh, okay, but did they help? I asked her. Yet she nodded. "I think so. I've never slept better," she said with a smile. The next few nights, the voices in her room continued, but they seemed quieter, like she turned the volume low so she wouldn't disturb me again. Several weeks went by, and every morning she would glow. She would make the best breakfast. Every night was movie night, and I knew it was because of her new boyfriend. As far as I knew, though, she hadn't seen him again in person besides their first date. "Do you talk on the phone with him?" I asked her. Then she laughed softly. "Yes, we talk frequently. Why do you ask?" she responded, turning towards me. "You haven't gone out at night again. The babysitter hasn't come back," I explained. "So well, I see. I do see him when you're at school. We like to eat lunch together, which is easy for me since I work from home," she explained, smiling warmly at me. "When can I meet him?" I asked her. "Then soon, baby. So hopefully soon. I know he will just love you," she told me, pulling me into a hug. "Can I know his name?" I said into her shirt. "So Tim. His name is Tim," she responded. Then I couldn't believe it. I was getting everything I never thought I would have. I began to dream of family road trips, matching Halloween costumes, Christmas morning. Even though I didn't have a clear vision of his face yet, I knew he would be handsome and kind, then exactly what my mom needed, and I just had to be patient. A few weeks later, Mom let me pick a scary movie to watch for our movie night. She warned me that it would keep me up all night, but I assured her I wasn't scared. She reluctantly sighed and put it on, settling into the couch with a glass of red wine. In the opening scene, there was a scary man in the house, and the teenage girl screamed and just backed up into a corner. "Why doesn't she call the police?" I asked my mom, and my mom snorted. "In real life she would, but this is a movie so it's all pretend," she explained. 30 minutes later, I was holding a pillow in front of my face, shaking at the terrifying man that filled our screen. "And okay, Mom, you were right, and I'm scared," I whimpered. When I turned towards her, I saw she was fast asleep on the couch beside me, snoring softly, a now empty wine glass still in her hand. I flicked the TV off, cloaking the room in darkness, before covering her with a blanket and moving the glass to the coffee table. "Good night, I love you," I whispered, kissing her cheek. I went to my room and tucked myself into my bed, nightlight on its brightest setting, but I was restless. I tossed and turned, imagining my jacket hanging over my chair as a monster crouched low, yet the curtains became a billowing ghost. The hum from the heater sounded like a growl. Then I sat up, sweating. I put my hands over my eyes and sighed deeply. Then I remembered my mother's audiobooks and how the dull conversations did sound soothing. I was sure she wouldn't mind if I borrowed some for the night, since she was sleeping so soundly in the living room. I leapt from my bed and walked carefully down the hall to her room, quietly clicking the door open, so I wouldn't wake her up. Her room had a soft glow as she left her lamp on next to the bed. I reached her nightstand, looking for the small tape player she thrifted a few years ago, but it was nowhere to be seen. "Where is it?" I whispered, gently moving books and jewelry boxes around her room looking for the black box. Maybe she left it in the bathroom, I pondered out loud, opening the door to the wide space and flicking on the light. And I wasn't prepared for what I saw, yet some nights, it's all I can see. A grown man stood in the shower wearing a pair of what seemed to be basketball shorts with chains around his ankles and wrists. Bruises crowded his face and visible body, and deep cuts ranging from fresh to mostly healed. When I flicked the light on, he jolted, and his gaze snapped up to me, then his eyes were filled with hate, venom. To this day, no one has ever looked at me with such disdain. I was waiting for him to scream, or yell curse words at me, but I only heard muffled sounds, so I realized his mouth was duct-taped. I gasped, stumbling backwards into the towel rack. "What are you doing in my mom's bathroom? But who are you?" I shrieked. His eyes filled with panic, and he seemed like he was trying to speak to me, but I couldn't make out any words. I could feel my heart racing like I was in my own scary movie, and then I remembered what my mom said. "I'm calling the police," I yelled, running to my mom's phone plugged in on her nightstand. I picked up the phone and quickly dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? There's a man in my house. He looks scary, and I don't know him. Okay, sweetie, are you home alone? The voice asked, and I heard typing in the background. No, my mom is on the couch sleeping. We were watching a scary movie, but she had wine, and she said that makes her sleep more. I responded. Okay, police are on the way to you. How old are you? The lady asked me. I'm 8. I cried softly. I could hear the chains rattling against the glass shower door in the bathroom. Sweetie, don't cry. I'm going to stay with you. Can you find somewhere to hide? Stay on the phone with him. The cell phone was snatched out of my hands, and in a blur I saw it smash into the wall. I covered my face with my hands, waiting for the scary man from the shower to grab me and do the same. What are you doing, my love? A familiar voice asked me. I slowly moved my hands, and my mother stood before me, her head tilted slightly, waiting for my answer. Mommy. There's a man in your bathroom. He looks scary like the guy in the movie. I didn't want him to hurt you. I began to openly cry, big sobs that shook my small shoulders. Oh, my baby, my mom cooed, wrapping both arms around me. Then is the man gone? I called the police, like he said. I started to explain, and through our embrace I felt her stiffen. Did you tell them where we lived? She asked calmly. I shook my head into her pajamas. I sensed her relax. Then what did you tell them? She asked. I told them there was a scary man in our house, and you fell asleep when we were watching our scary movie. I told her, yet she laughed softly, kissing my head. That's perfect. They will just think it's a prank or a sugar high kid. Good job, my baby, she said into my hair. Yet what do you mean, Mom? There's a man in your shower, and he's scary, I cried. No, he isn't scary. You just weren't properly introduced, she said, softly leading me back to the bathroom.